I've got a nice, light, refreshing, bubbly sourdough starter in this coffee cup. This is what I like to use for my sourdough starter every day. It's nice and wide, and I can get a spatula in here. Sure, it's not as satisfying as using a mason jar where you can see the bubbles from the side, but you can see them from the top. Now, who are the two biggest names in the internet when it comes to cooking? Well, okay, I mean, I'm not talking Gordon Ramsay big, but two of the biggest names are both Brian Langerstrom, whose videos are very baking-centric, as he spent time as a professional baker. And then you've got Josh Weissman, who is very good and all-around. And what do they both have in common? They both have videos where they show you how to make sourdough starters. They both have videos where they show you how to make sourdough bread. They both have advanced and basic versions. So what I decided to do was I made the Josh Weissman starter, and then I spent 6 weeks every week making Josh Weissman's sourdough recipe. Then once I got fairly decent at his recipe, I hibernated that starter in the fridge and I started the Brian Langerstrom sourdough starter. And I made Brian Langerstrom sourdough. And I'm going to show you a quick montage now, a little time lapse of me doing both steps to make the 3 breads in front of us today. Josh's recipe makes 2, Brian's makes 1. After we get back from that little heads up montage, where I'm not going to go into too much detail because they both have much better, excellent videos on their own steps, I'm going to cut these open and we're going to declare a winner on whose bread is better. And we're also going to make one of my favorite sandwiches with it to see if the nuances really show through once you start adding other ingredients to it, making it into a sandwich. All right, we have our 2 starters. You can see on the left the Josh Weissman starter. You can see on the right the Brian Langerstrom starter. I had these starters out on my counter for weeks as I was feeding them, and I had them labeled Josh and Brian. My wife didn't quite get what I was doing at first, so she just thought it was cute that I named the starters Josh and Brian. She didn't get it till I got her to watch their videos, and then she's like, oh, that's what you're doing. So here at the beginning of each step, they vary right off the bat. What Josh wants you to do is to take your starter, and then when you're going to feed it, you take your discard, and you normally toss it or pitch it, right? You can take that discard because that's the same material that you feed, right? You take your starter in the morning, you discard a bunch of it, you feed it, and you put it back away till you're going to use it. Well, that discard's the same stuff you left in the bowl. So you do like a double feeding. We'll call that a levain. And then that's what you use to bake with. And if you don't do that, if you use all your starter, well, now you've lost your starter. I mean, you spend a week cultivating the yeast to make that starter usable, and then you'd use it all up. So that's how you can keep your starter going. That's how you get old starters, because the older the starter is, the better everybody says the sourdough tastes. Brian's has you use your entire starter, and then before you add it to your dough, pull some back and continue that for your starter. Now, Brian also has you just let it ferment at room temp, while Josh has you ferment it in heat, either the heat of the light bulb of your oven or a fermentation station. Now, really, you can get the rest of your dough ready at any time because there's no wet ingredient. If you just want to get the flour ready, and you can mix your flours in a bowl and let them sit off right after you do this, or you can wait till closer to when you actually need them. Another tip or trick, I did it kind of silly here. I put flour into my bowls. I did, and then I zeroed out my scale every time. And then sometimes I had to take a little bit out of my bowl and put a little more into my bowl. You could also scale everything out into a separate container and then dump it into your big mixing bowl. That might be a little more efficient. I don't know. I don't know what I was thinking here, to be honest. In case you're wondering, we have Josh on the left and Brian on the right. So to get your water at the right temperature that they want, all I do is I just turn my tap up to hot, fill my cup up, check it with an instant read, and then
if it's too hot or too cold, I pour some out and I just play with the tap till I get it right, and it generally works out. Now with the Josh recipe, he wants you to thermalize the temperatures with each other, or normalize them, I should say. So basically, after you're done mixing this, and like I said, up until you add the water, you can do this whenever you want because it's just flour sitting in a bowl. Your bread flour and your white flour. Once you add the water, it's kind of go time. And Josh wants you to put it in the same warm environment for about 45 minutes as your levain, so the temperatures normalize. Both guys agree on the fact that you need salt in your bread. Now, we went full screen here because there wasn't really a comparable Brian moment to this. Josh has you take your fingers and plunge right into your dough. That way, when you pour your levain on top of it, you've got your... it can mix in a lot easier. Brian doesn't even have you let the temperatures normalize. Right after I had that dough ready, I don't know if you noticed, but my levain went in it. Now, both of them are in my fermentation station at this time. And we're doing some gluten building folds now. And you know what? When I was doing this, I definitely thought, because Josh Weissman's was more involved, I felt like I was doing more with it, that I was giving it more love. Basically, that it was going to turn out to be a superior product. Was I right or was I wrong? Now, Josh's also yields 2 breads where Brian's only yields 1. So that's something important to notice too. And you know what? Just because one turned out better for me doesn't necessarily mean one will turn out better for you. Another thing, they both mention using actual proofing baskets, linen-lined baskets. I found using a tea towel because I wasn't ready to go buy some linen-lined baskets. So I used these plastic bowls with tea towels. And the different textures of the towels, because the dough sit in them long enough that the texture imprints into the dough. And when you throw some raw flour on it before you bake it, it gives you a nice texture. It gives you something cool to look at on the dough. Because one of the things about sourdough is they all look awesome, right? Like none of them that's not like a boring loaf of bread. So Josh has also had a much more convenient schedule. Like you read the schedule of it and it's like, oh, I can start the day before. It's only about an hour of my time active and about 12 hours passive of just letting it hang out and ferment and double. So as long as you're home that day, it's really cool. And then in the morning, all you have to do is wake up and bake it. So schedule-wise, if you're just getting into this, I do recommend learning the steps on Josh's if you can, or on Brian's, just because timing-wise, it's a lot easier to follow his schedule. Brian's schedule is a little more in your face, like you're gonna do it in that one day, and you're gonna be stuck in your kitchen all day. So you both cooking methods, you really want to get those Dutch ovens preheated. I found it easier to put some parchment paper to line them. And you know what? You can reuse the same parchment paper. If you're going to make a lot of these, you can do it. Just don't preheat them with the parchment paper. Now, the reason that sourdoughs are always scored or cut with scissors, you can do whatever you want really, is because you need an opening in the top for it to spring open. When the heat gets into it, it'll use that fault that you've added in there to burst. And about halfway through cooking them, you're going to take the lids off because the lids hold the steam in there. And that really helps at the beginning of the bake. But then you're going to take the lids off and finish unlidded.
Okay, one safety tip. If you get the choice, see how this bread knife, they come down almost like, I don't know, like teeth or something? And this is more like a regular saw. I find that this style slides off of the harder crust on these sourdoughs. And this digs in. So this is a little safer in my opinion. Now, coming off of the bake, I baked these this morning. They came out of the oven around 9 o'clock. This one, I don't know. It's flat here. This one looks fine. And then this is the Brian, it was very wet. And, you know, it did have this very nice split here. It looks very rustic. All three of them look like Grandma made them, I think. So why don't we go with the one with the defect in it for the Josh Weissman? Because I feel like that might be how your first one comes out. Now I'll tell you, the first time I baked this recipe, it came out damp on the inside like a banana loaf, like banana bread. If you go back to my mussel video, I ate that with my first sourdough. And this does have that clamminess to it, almost like a banana bread. Let's cut off a slice. It's really tough at the bottom. Let's try switching to the other bread knife. Like I said, if you have the choice, that one feels a little safer, but you got what you got. Okay, let's cut this in half. It tastes sour. And it tastes like sourdough, but you can see this huge air pocket in here. Like I can put my whole finger in here. There's nothing stopping me. I have giant cavities here. Now I know there's lots of ways, you know, you could say I didn't fold it right, I didn't spend enough time kneading it. But I followed the directions. Alright, this is the Brian Langerstrom, and it's still warm. Much easier to cut through. See, I skipped with that one too. Cut this in half. Okay, so it's not exactly fair because this is warm and this isn't, but this is spongier, denser, and you saw how hard it was to cut through it. This is a lot softer. It's funny because I had a preconceived notion over who the winner was going to be, simply just based off of the ease of making the recipes. Not ease, but the time schedule. I feel like the Josh Weissman bread definitely had a lot easier scheduling, but I think the Langerstrom bread, so I'm going to do some hardcore editing because I keep chewing. So I thought the Josh Weissman bread it was my clear favorite coming into the taste test because just how much easier it is to work that schedule into a daily routine. And I like the rhubarb method at the start of it to make sure you have everything thoroughly mixed. But I think Brian's strength building folds in the middle more than make up for it. Probably a combination of the two would work better. Especially the strength building folds in Brian's are much more with the corner pinching. It brings the dough together better. So the only thing left to do is to make a sandwich out of these and see if that changes anything. That is our Brian Langerstrom. Alright, not the easiest thing to cut. This marrow butter is still fresh out of the freezer. It does thaw and melt pretty fast. So we're going to give the outside of this a good rub down in it. Okay. I will tell you though, every time I cut the Josh Weissman bread, even though it's cold, it puts out this sourdough smell. As soon as you crack the surface of it, it smells delicious. Okay. Now, a little bit of slice and a half of cheese. So I come up with this sandwich at work one night, just kind of going through the fridge. And I'm like, I need to give this sandwich a name. And one of the guys says, what do you mean name it? Like, you just made it. And I said, yeah, but like, you know, the first Morty sandwich was just made, and the first Reuben sandwich was just made. And he's like, so you're comparing this to a Morty or a Reuben? And I said, sure, why not? And he says, because you think everything you make is the best and needs to have some special attention. So I said, you know what, after what you're saying, I'm going to name this the hater sandwich, because you are just being a hater. We're using marrow butter. At the restaurant, we use tallow butter for the outside of this grilled cheese variant. We have cheese, so mustard down first, then cheese, prosciutto, and then you should be using a horseradish mayonnaise on the top, inside of the top bun, which I unfortunately forgot to bring some horseradish home. I don't have any in the fridge, so don't let the fact that I don't have the horseradish stop you from using the horseradish. Just mix a little bit into a little cup with some mayonnaise and spread it on, and you will be just fine. Now, the other thing, you saw I had some difficulties, putting these breads together. They are basic breads using basic guides. Okay? You also saw that they didn't turn out necessarily the most awesome. The other batches were kind of hit or miss too. Sometimes they were amazing, and sometimes they weren't. And I think that just goes to show you, that's probably because these are basic recipes. They both have much more advanced versions of these that will probably yield better results once you get good at it. Okay, so we have our Brian Langerstrom and our Josh Weissman. That is some soft, tender, flaky bread. Joshua, this is some chewy bread. Not like chewing gum chewy, but chewy, my friend. I think the clear winner here, based off of eating this in a sandwich form, is Brian Lagerstrom. Now, if you want to see a more detailed video on the hater sandwich, let me know down below in the links. I'll include a recipe for this along with links to Josh's video, Brian's video, and I'll put this in a playlist. So for this week, I've been Executive Chef James MacInnis, and thanks for coming to my kitchen.